Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on the side of the world you're at. Welcome to the 19th CBDC broadcast from FNA. I'm going to allow 1 or 2 minutes for the people to join. In the meantime, we can stretch our legs, grab a glass of water. We're going to start in 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, I'll start with the housekeeping. So once again, welcome everyone. This is the 19th CBDC broadcast. Today's agenda is starting with this housekeeping and the introduction to FNA that I'm going to deliver in a couple of seconds. Then we're going to start with our guests, Aniko and Chris. We're going to talk about how the Central Bank of Hungary is testing DLT-based solutions, which is a very interesting topic to obviously to our retail and wholesale CBDC topics that we bring to our broadcast. Afterwards, as you all know, we're going to have at the end of our broadcast, the last 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to have a session of question and answers. So please share your questions in the Q&A window that it's included in the Zoom app. Please do not send them through the chat because we're not checking the chat that much. What we're going to check is the Q&As. So with no further explanation or about what we're going about the housekeeping, we're going to start talking a little bit about what FNA is. FNA is a leader in advanced network analytics and simulation. FNA software is used to uncover hidden connections and anomalies in large complex data sets, and that obviously is used to predict the impact of stress events to optimally configure financial systems and financial market infrastructures. As you can see from the icons that we have at the right of the slide, FNA is trusted by the world's largest central banks, government authorities, commercial banks, and financial infrastructures. About the CBDC, at FNA, we work at this in the CBDC space from a very broad perspective. We like to call it the CBDC lifecycle solution. And this is about taking into account that CBDC is a full journey into a digital currency. So as in the right of the slide, we can have that there is like a pre-launch section or path of CBDCs in which FNA supports CBDC stakeholders about the research, the design, and the pilot phases of CBDC, which are then, after the rollout, are followed by the monitoring part of this CBDC journey, in which measuring the adoption from a systemic viewpoint is perhaps the best way to characterize it. Afterwards, we also have visibility and analytics for the stakeholders, mainly central banks, to understand what is happening with the rollout of the retail CBDC, and obviously to extract the oversight and monetary policy making features out of the retail CBDC data. And finally, because CBDC is a new product and there should be a lot of adjustment after the rollout, all the data that FNA is able to gather and to process and analyze will allow the stakeholders to do some iterative change to adjust the retail or wholesale CBDC policy and to introduce new features as they're needed. So that's what FNA does in the CBDC lifecycle. I'm happy to discuss it afterwards if someone is interested on this part. So after this brief introduction of FNA, I'm very glad, very happy to introduce our guest speakers today. First, we have Aniko Szombati, Chief Digital Officer from the Central Bank of Hungary. Aniko is the Managing Director responsible for digitization and fintech development of the Central Bank of Hungary. As I already mentioned, she is the Chief Digital Officer. Thank you for joining us, Aniko. Second, we have Chris Ostrowski, a co-founder and CEO of SODA, which means Sovereign Official Digital Association. Chris has worked with central banks and public financial institutions for over a decade while working for the OMFIF in London, and it's a very well-known face in the blockchain and the central bank digital currencies space. So, Chris, thank you very much also for joining us. Thank you both for joining us and for allowing us to have this very interesting conversation today.
Hi, welcome everyone.
Hello, greetings.
Thank you, Chris and Aniko. So as usual, and also because of my central bank background, I would like to give you both the opportunity of making the disclaimers that you find appropriate for the occasion. Aniko, I think you will go first.
Hello, good afternoon or good morning for everyone, and thank you for joining the meeting and let me the opportunity to share with you how me personally and also the Central Bank of Hungary views the present and the future of CBDCs.
Thank you, Aniko. Chris?
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Aniko. Yes, so as many of us on this call know, often working with central banks requires sort of quite a lot of patience, and a lot of things are done in a sort of testing mode. So there are some things on this call that I won't be able to speak about publicly in the terms of the work that SODA's doing. So I would encourage anyone to get in touch with me via the SODA website or via my email address, where I can share more about some of the things we're working on with central banks. But it's a pleasure to be here to be able to talk about the work that the Central Bank of Hungary are doing and to discuss this further with FNA.
Thank you, Chris and Aniko. So let me do a very brief introduction into the subject that we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about how the Central Bank of Hungary and SODA have developed a joint project on the use of digital solutions. This includes NFTs and retail CBDCs at some point. So today we're going to share valuable insights about how the public engagement and some hands-on experience is shaping the development and adoption of retail CBDC. And this is done at the Central Bank of Hungary by leveraging NFTs and coin collecting to improve how the people can understand and interact with digital currencies and some other digital products that can be issued by a central bank. So obviously, at the end, the idea is to explore how a central bank is taking a different approach to the adoption of a digital product, maybe a digital currency as a retail CBDC, which is the main topic of our broadcast. So at the end, this is also talking about how to prepare the public for the introduction of our retail CBDC, which is something that in the last versions of our broadcast has come as something very important, as we should be prepared and the central bank should be prepared to face not very easy adoption. And as we have concluded in the previous broadcast, perhaps this is because the consumers and the merchants, I mean, the end users, are not ready to do it. So perhaps this is a very interesting topic to talk about, to see how we can prepare the public for adoption. So with this, first I would like to break the ice with both of you by asking you if you can tell us a little bit about what you are doing in the retail CBDC realm. Aniko, you can go first. Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, I'm representing the MNB, the Central Bank of Hungary, who has the ambition to be in the forefront of CBDC research and development. So actually, we started our journey with quite a deep theoretical preparation, which was emanated in the publication of our book called At the Dawn of a New Age, Money in the 21st Century, which was quite a unique composition of CBDC research from several angles. So not only payments or infrastructure, which are the most common one, but we also devoted quite a few chapters on monetary policy implications, financial stability aspects, and last but not least, published a new design framework, which is about to give the professional society a 7-step decision-making framework which is consistent and which actually relies on the fact that first and foremost we need a use case. We need a justification for the central bank to endeavor into the CBDC realm. It can be either a market failure, or it can be a quite definite policy objective, but it has to be really concrete, and it is only the first step of this 7-step decision-making ladder. And in our view, technology only comes as the last one, given the very quickly developing technological environment. So overall, after this theoretical foundation, we also decided that since it's quite an uncharted territory, we need to set up real pilots with real users that can bring us forward in this journey. And more than 1 year ago, we launched our first retail CBDC pilot in the form of the Money Museum application, which was a dedicated blockchain-based system in a gamified form. And on the one hand, it helped to engage with the numismatic interested audience from Hungary in a digital form, and the other hand help the central bank to experiment with the blockchain technology. But also recently, we launched another application called Digital Student Safe Application, which is a centralized ledger-based but very modern platform. Actually, this is already a complete CBDC ecosystem with commercial banks and with fintechs involved. And even though it's a small scale one, so we are targeting students in the age of 8 to 14, but it also helps us to engage with the real customers and real problems. And
That's
also we
really
are quite active in the wholesale realm as well.
That's really interesting, Aniko. I have a very silly question. I live in Colombia. Can I open the app? I mean, can I download the app for the Money Museum and to try it?
Actually, both apps are only achievable in Hungary. So, but please come visit us, and we can show you the functionalities in more detail.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Yes, and so it's a privilege to see all these CBDC activities take place with central banks all over the world at the moment. One of the things that we've certainly seen over the past few years is central banks, I suppose, move from the point where they try to understand what a CBDC is and how it can work within their existing framework, to look at what it's actually for, and to look at the kind of new habitat that this form of public digital money will exist in. And this has led more central banks to look a little bit further towards a kind of user-first based approach, or a use case first based approach. And what Aniko is describing here is one sort of pioneering way of doing it. There are others as well. The Central Bank of Brazil have a similar approach. There are other central banks that SODA are working with that have similar approaches as well, where you're really looking at how you can sort of test the trust issues around the new technologies, whether it's going to be a centralized ledger with a form of token, or whether it's going to be a decentralized ledger, a permissioned blockchain, or a permissioned blockchain, in order to sort of see how a form of central bank issued instrument will behave in this new habitat. You have to find some way of putting the instrument into the end user's hands. And this is a pretty difficult thing to do. If you look at how central banks approach this, it's no wonder at all that so many central banks sort of take refuge in industry groups and research groups and sandboxes and proofs of concepts and these sorts of things, because this in a controlled environment, the risk is very low. You can issue something that has a form of value, and that you can do that in a way which allows the central bank to, I suppose, proceed safely in a research type mode. What is very interesting is if you can take that research into a habitat which allows people to actually use the central bank instrument, then you can learn things that you can't really replicate in a very controlled environment. And coin collecting is a bit of a kind of ingenious solution to this here, because there is some sort of value. The system that the Central Bank of Hungary have set up does allow the NFTs are gamified. When you've collected enough of the NFTs, there's a commemorative coin that the Money Museum can issue, and this allows the central bank to see how that form of value, even though it's not foreign value, can behave in the new habitat. And so this, I think, is something that's becoming more appealing to central banks and to other, I suppose, public money issuers and actors, as they consider how you can see what the new habitat's going to look like. It's changing all the time, as Aniko said. Any big pronouncements from central banks about what the future will and won't look like need to be treated with caution, because we keep hearing it will never be on a permissionless network, it will never be on a permission network, it will never be an account-based system or a token-based system. All of these types of statements are generally too early in the process, and the research can only take you so far. And so I think this is the sort of thing that can allow a form of public money to exist in a new habitat, which will be, I think, pretty crucial as we go ahead and get closer towards CBDCs potentially becoming part of the monetary landscape.
Thank you, Chris. While I was hearing you both, I would say that this is the 19th CBDC broadcast, so we are already having quite a few. If we run, I would say that if we were able to run some machine learning algorithm into the transcription of the broadcast, I would say that there is an increasing trend to take into account the use case. Because at the beginning, everyone was talking about, yeah, the technology solution should be like this, or the motivation of the central bank is this one or that one, or financial inclusion in Africa, or financial inclusion in Latin America, but it's efficiency and monetary sovereignty in Europe. But I feel that everyone is going, or it's focusing a little bit more as time passes by in the CBDC path about the use case. And I think this is very smart, because what we have seen in the rollouts that we have already seen in some countries, that the adoption is low and slow. So I think this is very interesting, and thank you both for this brief introduction. So let's go to the first formal question, which is for Aniko, which is about exactly the same thing that I just mentioned. I mean, there are many retail CBDC pilots already out there. There are some countries that have already rolled out retail CBDCs. Why do you think that the Central Bank of Hungary's particular approach before launching or piloting also or in large scale a retail CBDC is the way to go?
So yes, it's a difficult question, but let me start with just a brief introduction. So the Central Bank of Hungary set up my area 4 years ago, dedicated to digitalization and financial innovation. This is the area where actually financial knowledge and technology knowledge are merged. And since we are working a lot with fintechs, we learn also from fintechs. And what we learn is the user first. So we quite strongly believe in the technology providers, and we are not devoting time to just in-house technology testing, but we want to elaborate what we can give to the users, how we can engage with the users. And so last year was actually the 75th anniversary of introducing forint or currency as a legal tender. So we wanted to have something to commemorate this event. And then came the idea that we should set up a mobile application for the newly established Money Museum, where we can offer a gamified format for money enthusiasts to enter the platform, answer quizzes in the realm of financial literacy, and in return, they are given randomly allocated pieces of NFTs, which are consisting of set of NFTs like the 6 letters of the word forint and so on. So these randomly allocated NFTs have to be collected, stored, exchanged, and finally they can redeemed via applying for a lottery where physical sets of coins are allocated, and where all these physical sets of coins can also be registered on the blockchain with the help of a specific QR code, which is put on the ceiling of these sets of coins. So on the one hand, we had this idea to engage our customers, but we were not really sure how popular this could be, and we were planning the whole scheme to be run for 1 or 2 months. But finally, it turned out that these enthusiasts who represent from primary school year students to 70 plus pensioners are really keen on collecting NFTs from the Central Bank of Hungary, and we already distributed more than 500,000 NFTs in this form. And on top of that, we as a central bank learned really a lot about how to set up these processes, how to design a proper UX UI flow, how to deal with KYC issues, how to put together all the bylaws or the internal processes. This is the first platform, apart from our homepage, which is operating 7/24. How to repair anything which goes wrong while still be available. We are on both the App Store and the Google Store. Our users can always give a rating to us, how to communicate, how to improve these ratings if something goes wrong. So we really have a good picture of what a large-scale CBDC operation and implementation can look like, even from having only a smaller scale endeavor for the moment.
That's really interesting, Aniko, and several things that I would like to highlight from what you said is the UX UI experience of the people is really important for the success of anything related to a new product, even if it's a central bank product, because this time the central bank product it's competing with the other forms of money. So there should be like the use case should be clear and so on and so forth. And it's very interesting because you sounded like a book that at FNA we have read a lot, which is, I don't remember exactly the name of the book, but it's like How Big Projects Get Done, if I'm not wrong. And it says that normally you should start by the end of the project. I mean, who is going to receive this product? Why is it going to use it? How is it going to use it? And then work backwards to try to get the things better designed. So it's very interesting what you just described, Aniko. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next question. This is for Chris. Chris, from your viewpoint, how does this approach differ from the majority of other current pilots? And how does it help in understanding the practical implications and the potential challenges of implementing a new digital form of money by a central bank?
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Aniko, for that sort of comprehensive overview. If I may, just to sort of touch on what Aniko said, I've got a few of the props here that Aniko actually sent me. So these here are the NFTs themselves that spell out the word forint. So if you answer a quiz question, you get an NFT for one of these letters. And when you collect the whole set, you are eligible to receive the commemorative coin from the central bank. And the fact that these exist, you know, and in this form that is tangible enough and can be in the hands of people at the end of the in the real world is an example of how, as you said, you need to start the project. So the end users themselves have the opportunity to get their hands on the NFTs, and there is some sort of value in this. These are not foreign value, but they are gamified in that not everybody gets all 6 straight away. You have to, exchange or answer the question to get all of the NFTs in order to have the potential to win the prize. And this is, I suppose, mimicking that form of money which sovereign money is then would then ultimately create. If you really think about it, I mean, the blockchain technology that exists out there in the world is not going to disappear. I mean, Bitcoin is very unlikely to disappear. Permissioned blockchains are becoming used in enterprises. Permissionless blockchains are being used as well for all sorts of reasons. And there's always going to be a lot of debate in these years, I think in the 2020s, about what's the right thing to do. Is it better to have a decentralized system or a centralized system? This isn't going to resolve itself quickly. So you need to find some way of utilizing the external technologies that are being innovated while also being able to put some sort of instrument that mimics value into this new habitat. And this is what we can, this is what it's possible to do with these types of experiments. It is true that if you looked at this prima facie, you would think, well, this is a bit gimmicky. What's this got to do with money? What's this got to do with a CBDC? But the more that one reflects on this, and the more you see central banks trying to take the, I suppose, nuclear option of creating a CBDC, the more appealing this kind of test and deploy method becomes, because there's no reason why you can't insert sovereign value afterwards once you have tested the technology, once you are happy that the method of validation, that the ecosystem and the UX in which tokens exist, in which value exists, are working for you, for your objectives as a central bank. It's unconventional to look at it that way, but there's nothing to stop that from happening. Now, I know this isn't the Central Bank of Hungary's plan. They're taking a one step at a time approach. They haven't made a decision on CBDC yet, but it is technically possible to do that. And this, I think, does become more and more appealing when you sort of see how many central banks have got to the stage where they want the kind of, they want to, if you create a CBDC that renders all other payment mechanisms redundant on day one, then you have such a big decision and such a big system change to make that it's very difficult to make it in that way. And so I think this is one of the reasons why the MNB's approach is interesting and innovative, and others are copying this as well at the moment. It doesn't have to be NFTs. It doesn't have to be for a commemorative coin. It's got the connection to money, which makes it helpful, but it doesn't have to be that as well. I mean, one of the questions I saw was, do we really need a blockchain to, for CBDCs? Perfectly fair question, but how are we going to find out if we don't issue some sort of value into this habitat to know whether we need it or not? You're not going to know. It's all going to be conjecture otherwise. And so this is why it's quite important to try these sorts of things.
Great, Chris. Thank you. Aniko, going back to you, by implementing this blockchain-based ledger on the Central Bank of Hungary infrastructure to test drive digital solutions, this is obviously, and this is like the whole point of this is a very innovative approach to finding the retail CBDC use case. Can you share a little bit about the main insights that you have gained through this approach so far?
Yes, we have several actually. So first and foremost, I would like to get back to the issue that Chris was talking about, whether we need a blockchain or not. So at some jurisdictions, it is not really a question when retail CBDC comes to the forefront, because for example, in China, they can face some kind of scalability issues at the very first moment. But Hungary, here we have approximately 10 million inhabitants. So our country is, I would say, a perfect size for testing different approaches, because the size of the future user base doesn't restrict us to to turn away from blockchain. So therefore, we wanted to have a blockchain-based pilot and also a central ledger-based pilot, so that to experiment with both technologies. And what Money Museum application taught us that we have to be first and foremost really flexible. We have to be responsive. We have to be able, as I refer to, repair things while we are operating continuously. So, for example, in past months, we faced some performance issues because, as I said, we planned it as a more limited scale project. But since its popularity resulted in so much activity, once in a while, it seemed that we ran out of capacity, and we had to buy additional capacities at a very short notice. And so these are the issues that wouldn't evolve if it were like just a closed pilot with some theoretical user base, or for only someone from my department, because we have the real use cases. And what this tell us is that we could identify all the major areas where we need expertise, where we need staff, and how to put them together, how to optimize the processes. And I can say that this is achievable. So even though central banks haven't endeavored beforehand in dealing with new technologies and operating client-facing applications, it can be done. And now we have a view how to scale it up, as Chris already referred to that, in a later future phases where more broader use case is identified and is about to be implemented.
Thank you, Aniko. That's very interesting. Just a very blunt question. Out of the 10 million inhabitants, can we know which is like the number or the order of magnitude of people who are using the Money Museum app?
So actually, from our test and deploy approach, the mere number of users is not relevant. The relevant that we have a variable quantity of users who are active and who can teach us on how to progress and how to serve their needs. So we have around 10 or 20,000 users overall, but this is already very helpful for us to go and develop ourselves.
And I agree. I think that the target is not the 10 million, but a stable number of people who are really engaged into the technology. I agree with you. That's really significant. That's really interesting to know.
I think the main thing that the people are self-selecting and in a live field environment, and so this is what is different from most of other parts. It's not that these people have been told that they have to use this, or that you work for the central bank and you're getting your monthly salary in a CBDC. This is, I mean, how something like this grows or diminishes in interest represents the normal organic growth or diminishing of any sort of similar form of activity. So a totally live field environment is the thing that I think makes the testing most valuable in this test and deploy way. That's the way I would put it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that finding a stable use case, it's the most impressive thing right now, because what we have seen from retail CBDCs projects being rolled out is that everyone downloads the app or the mobile wallet, and afterwards they don't use it. So finding a stable use case, that's brilliant. I mean, that's the way to go, I would say. Chris, what lessons do you think that we can share with other central banks about considering the adoption of retail CBDC by consumers, with this way of speaking? You already have introduced this topic a little bit, but what things you can think that other central banks can learn from this?
So it's almost a kind of philosophical approach, really. I mean, you don't necessarily have to sort of carbon copy anything that the MNB are doing or that any other bank is doing. It's what is the use case, or what is the user-first experience that will make the biggest difference for this form of public digital money? If you're in a country with a high number of remittances, is there something that you as a central bank can do to offer remittance money minted in a new form or a form of token which can show a clear before and after experience for the end user? If you're in a situation where there's not, you've had financial inclusion as something which is one of the objectives for the CBDC work you're doing, what is it in particular in this form of financial inclusion that can work best for the end user? Is it a credit rating for the first time? Is it access to a form of yield which is out of the reach of the unbanked population? There are others as well. I mean, if one of the in a more developed country, and some of the other central banks I'm speaking to at the moment, whether if you have, like we have in the UK and in Western Europe and Central Europe and the US, you have a well-developed digitalized form of e-money already in existence. Is there something there which can show how a form of CBDC or a form of public money token can serve the end user in a way which is organic enough to really show that a test and deploy method is working? It could be micropayments, payments to read an article. There's a central bank we're working with that's quite interested in that as well. And being able to put this into the hands of end users and let it behave organically is the thing that I think Soda's sort of trying to do with a number of central banks. So it's more about the kind of philosophical approach. The NFT for a commemorative coin, especially gamifying the NFTs, is very appealing for a number of reasons. It appeals to central banks. It's connected to money, but it could be that there are other ways to do it as well. So it's more about starting with the user first experience and then working backwards. At Soda, we're technology agnostic. We can use a blockchain based system. We can use a non-blockchain based system, and we can work with central banks in whichever way they're trying to do this. So that's what I would say would be the approach, rather than what's often described as the kind of nuclear option where you press a button, a CBDC exists, and it renders all other form of payments potentially obsolete. A test and deploy approach where you start with the use case, measure that, see how that can serve the central bank's policy needs and also the end user's experience. So you're doing something which you can't do with cash or you can't do with bank account money. Then you've got the opportunity to sort of see whether the CBDC thing is what we're saying or whether it isn't, because until you get there, you're not really going to know that.
Thank you, Chris. When we're talking about the Money Museum app, the NFTs, I know I have read that you have activities like quizzes, coin collecting, token swapping. What has been the audience response to this gamified, that you have already called it, approach to the development of a digital, let's call it, asset? And how have you been able to use this to refine what the retail CBDC concept should be? In this case, for both of you, Aniko, if you want to start.
Yes, thanks. So just to rephrase what we were pushing before, that we have to implement a design thinking approach, meaning that that we always need to gain reflection from the users whether we are going to the right direction. And as I said, our users really like the idea that they can play on a central bank operated application. So overall, the first novelty is that we are entering the market of mobile applications, and that our users are trusting us and still US as an innovative institution. And on the other hand, just a takeaway for us with working on the blockchain technology. Actually, contrary to maybe other central banks' concerns, so the least problematic part was with the block operation of the blockchain itself. It's more about compliance, more about legal requirements, IT security, and as a whole to offer a proper customer journey for the users with the registration, with the redemption. So these are the main takeaways for us, which we are planning to publish during the year in a white paper format.
That's great, Aniko. You remind me something that several people have said during the FMI's broadcast, the Financial Market Infrastructure broadcast, which is that most problems about payments are 10% the technology, 90% something else. Chris, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. I think being able to frame this type of work in the context of it being a technical experiment is quite useful, because once you do start getting into all the sorts of things like, is it real money? We're creating a new type of money. What's the legal requirements for that? You need to bring lawyers in, you need to bring regulators in, you need to bring everything like that in. So just being able to get that sort of gamified form of value inside a technical experiment, or something that can be, that is seen to be a technical experiment, because that's what it is very helpful. What we're really talking about here is, how on earth do you test this stuff? How on earth do you get it out there? Because CBD, money is such a big thing that if you start saying, oh, we're going to change the whole type of money, then it's no wonder that so many central banks sort of, run into the wall quite soon. So this is quite, it's quite important in terms of how the language is presented here. Once people can kind of see what the MNB are trying to do here, and what we at SODA are trying to do as well with the MNB and other central banks, it does start to make a lot of sense. But it's, explaining why it's not easy to do it another way, and doing it this way allows the testing of the sorts of blockchain technology that would be very difficult to replicate. It's almost impossible, in fact, to say we're going to try CBDC and put it on a permissioned blockchain or a permissions blockchain. Very, very difficult to do that unless you go down this technical experiment route, where it mimics some of the value, mimics some of the activity, has a live field environment, and then you can see exactly what you're dealing with. And as Aniko says, look, there's a huge amount of work to come. If the digital forint is ever going to exist, and that's a policy decision for Aniko and her colleagues, there's still a huge amount of work to do, the regulatory stuff, the legal stuff, all the other stuff. But at least you know that it can exist in a way which is usable and user-friendly and makes a difference. At least you've got that bit done first, rather than doing all the other bit first, and then you find no one uses it.
I agree, Chris. Thank you very much. So for both of you, I think we all agree right now that having an existing use case or nurturing a use case for retail CBDC is key to the adoption of the retail CBDC. Do you think that the Central Bank of Hungary approach will foster the consumer use case for digital currencies and retail CBDCs? Who wants to start? Let's go with that.
I think you always want to make sure that there's an ecosystem that any form of digital money can step into. And this is one of the things that I'm sort of often challenged by central banks, when we say, well, okay, here's a really good use case in X given country, or this is the perfect use case. It needs to be, for it to have the best chance of doing the things that I certainly believe public digital money can do. Having an existing ecosystem, or having an ecosystem that can be built around the public digital money, is very important. So I think that is, again, as I said, difficult to replicate unless you do this sort of thing. But even in this type of habitat, you're still relying on, okay, so what comes next? If can the NFTs be swapped into a different habitat? Can they do this sort of thing? Can they do other sorts of things? That's an important part of the ecosystem work as well. Similarly, if you were doing it, if a central bank was issuing some sort of token that was connected to remittances or to yield or to credit ratings, what can those instruments do that allows them to plug into an ecosystem that allows you to buy micro insurance, to send money peer-to-peer immediately. All of those sorts of things as well are very important. So making it agile enough to do that is a very important part of how these experiments are undertaken, in my view.
Thank you, Chris. Aniko.
Yes, so just to add some aspects. So from our perspective, it's kind of an investment into this long-lasting relationship with the public, where we are already on their mobile phone. So they are really expecting the same level of service from us as from other applications, and they are happy to give us feedbacks on that. And we are we find it really helpful, and in a way we can invest in the future users of our CBDC, so that they are used to the idea that involving central banks into their everyday life, and in a wider perspective, with the help of Chris and with other communication channels, we are advertising what we are doing to other central banks and international institutions, and they like our approach very much, and hopefully their attention will be also turned to their users, what the users really want, how they can offer them something supplementing existing payment rails and not crowding out them, and how we can build actually the future of money.
That's great, Aniko. I'm going to, I have the last question before we enter the Q&As, which we have received several very interesting questions that I am willing to discuss some of them. Final question is, obviously to talk about the future is difficult, but what do you think are the potential future developments and trends in the realm of digital money, including retail CBDCs, that you see that will shape the financial industry and the society in Hungary and in the rest of the world?
So actually, my really short, concise answer would be that it's a marathon rather than a sprint. So we have to build ourselves, our capacity, our knowledge, and also the trust of the general public in what we are doing. And we mustn't be over ambitious about, for example, adoption numbers. So as a start, we have to offer an alternative form of money that is available for the public to use, and that is available for market-based innovators to base their future products on, and preferably the central bank can be the issuer of a really trustable, future-proof infrastructure that can actually be the basis of any future form of money. But since it's harmonized, it's a single ledger, these problems with the network effects and walled gardens will not evolve. So this is my view for the shorter and longer term future.
Thank you, Aniko. Chris, how about you?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, actually, about the role of central bank money and public digital money. I mean, if you look at the scale of interest and the level of activity that's going into what central banks are doing, but also what private companies are doing for central banks at the moment. I mean, it's almost every week there's a new company that says, we're opening a CBDC department, we're looking at this, we're looking at that. And even though it's very early days and it's hard to see what the market will look like, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that that public money in some sort of token digital form will exist in the future, and the benefits that can bring in terms of the reduction in the cost of payments, serving a wider digital asset community, and also some of the really cool stuff like the programmability, the machine-to-machine payments, all of that type of internet of value experience. The technology exists for that to happen. And I think the role that public money will, I don't think public money will become any less important as these things develop. The idea of sort of crypto taking over everything is very unlikely. And also, you know, I think central banks are becoming more interested in filling the role that Aniko described there than they were, say, 2 or 3 years ago when I first started talking at this. There's more interest and there's more perhaps self-confidence here, which is very encouraging. And there are, you know, people are willing to help, and you know, most people, particularly in, you know, countries like Hungary and in the Eurozone and elsewhere, are often quite fond of their national currencies, and they don't want to see them disappear. They like them, and this is, and if they can exist and serve the new sort of habitat and the new digitalized form of the internet of value, then that's a good thing. And so I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic when it comes to the future of public money and central banks and the role they play.
Thank you, Chris and Aniko, for discussing the questions that we have prepared. Now we're going to address some of the Q&As that we have received through Zoom. First one, the pilot seems focused on individuals. What about firms and merchants?
So actually, as I said, we have another pilot called Digital Studentship, where we already involve commercial banks, and we do believe that the successful adoption rests on merchants. So in other cases where we are having a complete forms of interaction or the complete journey of CBDC, we definitely involve merchants from the very first.
Great. Next question, I think, is why might it be appropriate to conduct a market impact study on CBDCs, and why hasn't it been done so far?
I mean, I think if that's specific to this particular project, I think it's still ongoing, isn't it? This is what Aniko would say. I think, I mean, there's never a final point, I don't think, with CBDCs. I mean, there's no like, right, we've done the test, this is what it shows, now we've got the answer. I think people who are expecting an answer like that in any jurisdiction will be left to be disappointed. I mean, Aniko, you mentioned the white paper later. That's probably the vehicle that you would point people to, I think.
Yeah, so we are not believing in theoretical impact assessment and studies, but to gain real feedback via real experiments.
Great. The next one that we have from the public is one of the targets for exploring CBDCs widening access to central bank money?
I mean, I can talk generally, but I do think that this is what should happen. I think more institutions and more people should access central bank money generally. I'm not talking on behalf of the MNB, I'm not talking on behalf of any particular central bank, but I do think that the access to central bank money, which for many people comes through cash or through if they happen to have a bank account, but is very accessible to banks, to commercial banks, could change how there could be a big improvement in the velocity of money and in economic relationships if more people have access to central bank money. That's kind of a personal opinion. Yeah, this might show that, but this is obviously up to the central banks in question as they undertake their work.
Indeed, we have to provide the choice for the general public in any circumstances, especially in the digitized world.
Okay, now going to have the last one, which is about the costs of blockchain solutions, which says that blockchains are structurally more expensive by a large factor than conventional systems. What is going to happen with the cost, for instance, that is going to be transferred to the merchant? How can this be addressed, I guess?
Actually, I would declare that we are running quite cost-effective pilots involving actually Hungarian fintechs as technology providers. So I'm not worried about the cost effects. We can, of course, broaden the issue to environmental costs, where the blockchain technology is a little bit having a little bit higher ecological impact as a whole, but it also have other types of benefits. And so this is always a complex issue to decide, and how to view all the aspects at once.
I mean, from my point of view, there's no point in excluding any form of technology at this stage. I mean, that's what would be absolutely crazy. I mean, whether blockchain is more expensive or less expensive from an environmental point of view or from a cost point of view, I mean, at the moment, we can give each other cash and the cost of payments is zero. If we can replicate that so we can give each other a form of digital cash or a form of CBDC where the cost is zero, this is something that is economically helpful, and it is the central bank serving the public with a form of sovereign value which acts in a way which, you know, it serves, you know, the people. It makes money work better for people. And so, you know, in some cases there's no blockchain involved at all in some of the work that SODA does. In other cases there's permissionless blockchains or permission blockchains or a combination or neither. But there's no point excluding any form of technology at this stage, as we try to see how digital money can best be represented into the future. The cost of blockchain, it's you know, it's very difficult to kind of reach a conclusive answer on that at this stage. It will be my answer to that.
Okay, Chris, Aniko, thank you very much. I think that we can be closing the questions to you. So thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. I was planning to show you something. I don't know if I can show it to you. Give me a sec. I don't know if Anastasia, you can check if you can show it, or I will do. Give me a sec. Give me a sec. Sorry about this. You're seeing a slide, I think, right?
Yes, I can see
it was very interesting because last month I made a presentation at the Inter-American Development Bank conference, and I was invited to talk about CBDCs adoption. And I think that the case that we have discussed today is really, it matches a lot of what I was speaking at this conference. So I am taking the liberty of taking 1 minute to explain my point at this conference, which is, and you can see that we have like 3 different circles in this Venn diagram, in which we have what central banks look for to the right, what consumers need or look for in the left, and what merchants need in the low part. Most, or the first movers in the retail CBDC space, I mean, the countries that we have seen already rolling out a CBDC, I think that they started from here, what central banks look for, right? And perhaps that's the reason, that's my idea. That's why there's low and slow adoption, because they're starting from what central banks look for. What we have discussed today is closer to starting here with what consumers need or what merchants need, because of that question that Aniko answered from the Q&As at the end, that merchants are also included in the other project that also the Central Bank of Hungary is doing. So you're not starting like here, but you're starting closer to here, to the sweet spot of adoption. So you're trying to mix the consumer's needs, the central bank, what the central bank is looking for, and what merchants need. So I think this is a better way to start. I mean, this is simulation at the end. And the interesting thing is, that's what I was presenting at this conference, is that what we do at FNA is we provide some simulation technology for you to start somewhere and to start making adjustments to the design options, including remuneration, privacy, legal tender, including some cashbacks, to put balance limits, to start traversing all this Venn diagram obviously, everyone is trying to find this sweet spot of adoption, but there are zillions of ways of doing it. You are trying some other way with gamification, with some hands-on experience for the people to try to get here. So that's perhaps my way to highlight all the work that you have done, which is really valuable, because you're not starting simply by from where central banks are looking for the motivations, but you're starting closer to the sweet spot of adoption. That's already a big advancement. So that's what I wanted to share at the end, to take this liberty. So I think we're missing the last slide, and in the last slide of what we were going to show, let me see if Anastasia, if you can help me with the last one. But
just to reflect on your slide, actually. So this is exactly what I meant by identifying the proper motivation. So when you are having a motivation like monetary sovereignty, it's the central bank's motivation, but not the end user's motivation to adopt your CBDC, which is new, which is maybe not so convenient or not well known compared to existing forms of money. So you have to offer them at least the same level of service and maybe something more, like a carrot, so that to like your product, which is new for the moment.
Thank you, Aniko. I'm going to close this very quick because we are already past the hour. So thank you, Aniko and Chris, for joining us. Very interesting and vivid discussion and insights about what the Central Bank of Hungary is doing. If you want to get in touch with Aniko, Chris, and myself, in the slides, you're going to find the links to our LinkedIn profiles. Thank you for joining the Retail CBDC, or the CBDC broadcast number 19. Please take into account that in July, we'll have some broadcasts with the Clearinghouse, BNY Mellon, BAS, and the Central Bank of Lithuania. Thank you for joining Aniko and Chris, and everyone who has attended the broadcast. Have a very nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.